Tensions escalate after the U.S. imposes broad sanctions against Russia. And teenager on a mission to combat child marriages in Zimbabwe through martial arts. Hello and welcome. You're watching Africa Live. We're coming to you live from Nairobi. I'm Hannah Viviers, and here with the latest in business is Rama.
That's right, Hannah. Here's what's coming up in the course of the hour. Nigeria's headline inflation hits 18.2% as food prices continue to climb. And Coinbase shares go up 7% in pre-market trading after their landmark debut at the Nasdaq. We'll have the details on those stories and plenty more coming your way in the course of the hour. For now, let's start with the latest in current affairs with Hannah.
Thanks, Rama. We'll see you in a bit. The global distribution of COVID-19 vaccines is still showing major disparities. That's the observation of the head of the World Health Organization, Tedros Ghebreyesus, while addressing a virtual event of the Gavi Vaccine Alliance. He said that some low and middle-income countries in the COVAX facility still had not received any vaccines, while others had not received their second-round allocation. The Africa's CDC director, Dr. John Nkengasong, now says he cannot predict when the second doses will arrive on the continent to cater for those who have had their first round of inoculation. The majority of African countries received their vaccines through the WHO-led COVAX initiative. Well, for more on this, we're now joined by Giram Chala, who is in Addis Ababa for us. Giram, thank you so much for joining us. There was an Africa CDC briefing today, Giram. What were some of the highlights you can share with us?
Hannah, Dr. John Nkengasong, the Africa CDC director, has been briefing media houses across the world through a virtual press conference. This is a weekly press conference, by the way. And the Africa CDC director has been saying that about 4.3 million Africans so far have been reported having the coronavirus, and 116,000 people in the continent have died because of the COVID-19 virus itself. But the good news is that from last week, this week, about 3% of decrease of new cases has been also registered. Dr. John Nkengasong has also in his press conference talked about the importance of distributing vaccinations across the continent. Countries like Nigeria have inoculated about 1 million of their citizens. Others have done a good job, like countries like
Giram,
also African states, which
Giram, we're also hearing about the growing concern about the possibility of many people on the continent not getting their second COVID-19 vaccinations, and those are people who would have gotten their first round already. How is this issue likely to be addressed at the continental level?
Well, it's a great concern across the continent. As you might understand, the more than a billion people in Africa are not getting full access to the COVID-19 vaccinations, and Africa CDC is really concerned about it. There are still African nations which are not really getting any kind of vaccination doses, as others are also doing a good job, like countries like Nigeria. So the next few days, we're expecting that Africa CDC is trying to get doses of vaccinations from different suppliers. But it is really a sincere concern from the African Union and the Africa CDC that countries are not getting COVID-19 vaccinations, and this is going to cause a lot of problems in the continent, by the way.
Giram, now added to what you've already mentioned, there's also that recent setback in the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. What should Africans who still hope to get inoculated expect?
Well, the good news that something that we can announce here, and something that we have heard from Africa CDC director again, is that now that the Johnson & Johnson vaccination has been paused in the United States and South Africa, the Africa CDC had also some sort of agreement for Johnson & Johnson to provide about 400 million doses, by the way, which for now might be in jeopardy because of the current situation. But then again, Africa CDC director has said that in the next few days, they're going to sign agreements with other suppliers, Pfizer, Moderna, and AstraZeneca at the same time. They want to call on the Indian government, for instance, when it comes to AstraZeneca, to open up ways of African states to get that vaccination. So the good news for African states and the people of Africa is that Africa CDC is trying to find other ways of accessing these COVID-19 vaccinations, and I hope that, and all of us hope that Africa CDC's efforts will be successful in the coming few days.
Thank you so much for all that, Giram Jala, speaking to us from Addis Ababa. Meanwhile, the Tunisian government says the country is ready to become a hub for manufacturing COVID-19 vaccines. The National Observatory of New and Emerging Diseases, as well as the Pasteur Institute in Tunis, also agrees that the country is prepared to produce the much-needed doses. Here is Adin Chouachi with more details.
The Health Commission, which appeared in Parliament, as well as members of the Scientific Committee and the COVID-19 Task Force, have concluded that Tunisia can manufacture the vaccines within 6 months.
We will use Tunisian and foreign technology to produce the vaccine. This project will not be limited to filling and packaging the vaccine. We'll be developing the whole drug and biotech industry in Tunisia once the production of COVID-19 vaccines is fully mastered. The health crisis is global. Together, we'll step up efforts to stop the pandemic.
The Minister of Health added that Tunisia also plans to export COVID-19 vaccines.
We've made the necessary studies and concluded that Tunisia is ready to manufacture COVID-19 vaccines to meet domestic needs as well as for Africa. We have the infrastructure and the skills.
Experts have called for the sharing of experiences and expertise between countries. The Health Department wants to see a global forum organized to allow participating countries to present their plans to combat the coronavirus pandemic.
The vaccines are not available for the world's population. We want to make the vaccine more accessible to the most vulnerable. That is why it's important to share our knowledge. Tunisia and other countries can manufacture and distribute the vaccine.
According to the World Health Organization, there are fewer than 10 African manufacturers capable of producing vaccines. The units are based in 5 countries: Egypt, Morocco, Senegal, South Africa, and Tunisia. A few weeks after launching COVID-19 vaccination campaigns, some countries are nearly exhausting their initial supplies. Tunisia plans to boost public-private partnership as well as international cooperation to manufacture more vaccines. Adnan Chawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Over in Nigeria, there are growing concerns about the government's plans to stop giving COVID-19 vaccinations due to a shortage. But health authorities there have assured the public that there are plans to get more vaccines to begin the second phase of inoculations. CGTN's Kelechi Mekalam reports.
We believe that in a situation where we still cannot specifically determine when the next batch of AstraZeneca vaccines will arrive, then I think wisdom only dictates that it's better for us to vaccinate people fully, and so that we can say that we have a pool of citizens that have been fully vaccinated, since this vaccination comes in 2 doses.
Nigerian health authorities announcing plans to halt the COVID-19 vaccination program. The country rolled out its mass vaccination campaign in March after receiving 3.94 million doses of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine. That's just enough to vaccinate less than 2% of its over 200 million population. But a high global demand for the vaccines has led to delays in the supply of the jabs.
Second delivery of this AstraZeneca vaccine is not very is not confirmed yet, as we expected, because we are expecting that before June or by June we should have the second delivery. You know, the third phase in quotes in Europe and Americas and UK, you know, is making the demand. In India itself is making the demand for the vaccine to be very high, and prioritizing, you would like these vaccines to go to where the virus spread and the disease are increasing. So because of that, Nigeria, you can see the numbers are getting down, and we are not experiencing the third phase yet. So they don't take Nigeria as being a priority for down. So that may delay the supply.
The nation just went through the second wave of COVID-19 and has succeeded in containing the virus. No COVID-19 related deaths have been reported in nearly 2 weeks. The vaccination program is at the core of government's plan to stop the spread of the virus.
The first phase implementation is 3 months. That is from the time you take your first jab to the time you take your second jab. That is when the first phase ends. So to 3 months' time, this same cohort will have their second dose heralding the end of the first phase. Arrangements have been put in place, and Nigeria now is on the priority list that the delivery of the second batch should occur. So it will come in such a way that it will not compromise the trend that we have already established now.
The government plans to vaccinate 40% of Nigerians by the end of a year and 70% by the end of 2022. The country is expecting an additional 41 million vaccine doses through the African Union, and health authorities hope there will be no further delays and setbacks in the rollout of the vaccines. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Most of the countries in Africa are relying on support from development partners and international initiatives to secure their doses of COVID-19 vaccines. But challenges still exist in sustaining the uptake of such doses. In southern Africa, Malawi will now have to destroy about 16,000 coronavirus vaccines. Officials there say the AstraZeneca doses are about to expire due to reluctance among citizens to take the shot. The doses were among the 102,000 donated by the African Union last month. So far, half of the 530,000 vaccines from donors have been administered. Coronavirus infections in Malawi have been relatively low, but there have been reports of a surge since the beginning of April. Well, many people on the African continent have resorted to self-medication to treat COVID-19 symptoms. Most prefer using concoctions made from ginger and garlic combined with antibiotics to treat their infection. But as CGTN's Inox Akole reports, some seem to have found out the hard way that the remedies and drugs being sold over the counter could worsen their condition.
In the outskirts of Kenya's capital, Nairobi, Emmanuel Atamba and his wife, Mercy Atamba, are tending to their small garden farm. A venture they started days after recovering from COVID-19.
What we went through was really terrible. It was very scary.
Their experience with the coronavirus began after they started exhibiting COVID-19 symptoms. Subsequent laboratory tests only confirmed their fears.
And we went into treatment, the whole house. Of course, the kids were also showing symptoms. But the basic medication, of course, what they say, you take the ginger, lemon, garlic, and turmeric. That is really what really helped us a lot in the initial phase. We were also given immune boosters.
Placed under home-based care, Atamba relied on recommendations from recovered patients. One drug was heavily mentioned, azithromycin.
When I went to the doctor, I asked what I can use. They also recommended the same, and they said if you have chest pains, you use azithromycin. But of course, there was really not much information exactly about how to use the drug, how much of the drugs to use. It was just 1 tablet per day, but not clear for how many days.
This nearly cost the life of his wife after 10 days of drug taking.
She started feeling weak, she had a headache, she became dizzy, and she was really struggling to breathe. And it was very scary because we opened the windows and it couldn't work. We went outside with her, sat outside with her, it still could not work.
Atamba decided to rush his wife to hospital. He feared that COVID-19 may have damaged his wife's lungs. But he will come to learn that her problem was not caused by COVID-19, but the drug that she used. She was simply showing symptoms of azithromycin overdose.
And he asked me, had she finished the dose? And then I was surprised because I didn't even know there was a dose.
Azithromycin is a 3-day dosage drug supposed to be administered by a qualified physician, but the family had bought theirs over the counter at a local chemist. Experts say self-medication is a practice that is on an upward trend on the African continent, especially during the pandemic. The Kenya Pharmacy and Poisons Board says self-medication is leading many not to having proper medical advice when needed. And some practitioners warn that self-medication could create a bigger problem in the future.
We are having a situation where diseases that could be treated by simple antibiotics, the antibiotics no longer work.
Doctors in Africa say a majority of COVID-19 patients placed under home-based care usually opt for self-medication once they exhibit flu-like symptoms, only to have their conditions worsen.
COVID-19 is a virus. Antibiotics are not indicated in the virus situation. The instance when we use azithromycin is specific. Doctors understand what it's being used for in particular cases, not for every single case of COVID-19.
With COVID-19 still spreading across the African population, doctors are advising anyone with symptoms to seek medical advice first before embarking on any treatment. Enoxikolia, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
It's the first week of fasting in the holy month of Ramadan. This is the second Ramadan to be observed since the outbreak of COVID-19. And as Yasser Hakim reports, prevention measures have restricted prayers and rituals of the holy month.
Like it did with every aspect of our lives, the coronavirus has also affected the holy month of Ramadan. The government has cancelled late-night tahajjud prayers and seclusion in mosques. Daily mass night Taraweeh prayers have been allowed, but reduced from 4 hours to half an hour. Mosques like this one in downtown Cairo have been applying strict anti-COVID health measures.
Inside the Nafisa Mosque, the sanitization process is done on a daily basis. We have applied measures such as social distancing, wearing masks, using only personal prayer rugs, allowing people in only 10 minutes before prayer time, and Taraweeh late-night prayers do not exceed half an hour. All this to protect the people's lives and keep them safe.
Mosques that break the rules would be closed down. These measures, for the second year running, have caused concern amongst many Muslims. They fear the less rituals they perform, the less reward they get from Allah.
You can't feel the spirit of Ramadan, the feel of the month because of the precautions. Yes, it's better than last year when mosques were totally closed. They are now partially open, but you still don't feel the holiness of the month.
Clerics, however, say these are special times that require special measures.
This is a very wise decision because in emergency circumstances, human life is more important to Allah than anything else. In our religion, the safety of human beings and adopting all precautionary measures in this case is more important than worship.
It's not just rituals like prayers and seclusion that are at risk, but other deeds associated with the holy month as well.
For example, daily charitable banquets for the poor, a common practice in Egypt, especially during Ramadan, has been cancelled to avoid gatherings amidst the pandemic.
People of faith explain there are alternatives which are as important.
Why not do all the rituals at home? This is one of the beauties of Islam. It gives you options in different situations. People can make seclusions in a room at home, pray and recite the Quran as if they are in the mosque, and they'll be rewarded as much as if they had gone to the mosque.
There are over 140,000 mosques of all sizes in Egypt. Huge efforts are going on to ensure the safety of tens of millions who congregate daily during the holy month of Ramadan. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
It's time now for us to take a short break. Here's what's still to come. Tensions escalate after the U.S. imposes broad sanctions against Russia. And teenager on a mission to combat child marriages in Zimbabwe through martial arts.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca. Among the crowds in Cairo.
Who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile. Along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Welcome back. You're watching News Making Headlines right here on Africa Live. The United States has issued a range of sanctions against Russia and expelled diplomatic personnel from Russia's mission in Washington, D.C. The White House says the sanctions are meant to target the Russian economy for interfering in last year's election and for launching cyber attacks. It says the move will affect individuals and private companies. The announcement comes just days after a phone call between leaders of the two countries. The Kremlin says it will soon respond and has summoned Washington's ambassador to Moscow.
The response to the sanctions will be unavoidable. Washington must realize that they have to pay for the deterioration of bilateral relations. The United States of America is fully responsible for what's happening. I would also like to say that the Russian Foreign Ministry has summoned the U.S. ambassador. We will share with you additional information on the outcome of this conversation, which will be uneasy for the U.S. side.
The United States Climate Representative John Kerry is in Shanghai for 3 days of talks with his Chinese counterpart, Xi Jinping, and other officials. It's the first visit by an official under the Biden administration. The trip comes ahead of Biden's virtual climate summit scheduled for April the 22nd to the 23rd, around Earth Day. The White House says 40 world leaders have been invited to the event. It's expected to unveil new targets for greenhouse gas emissions. Xu Mingqi reports from Shanghai.
It's very likely that the two sides do not have the same expectations for this meeting, especially after the dramatic shouting match between the two sides last month in Alaska. Now, China, for its part, has not released much information regarding this meeting, but the U.S., on the other hand, has been quite outspoken about their goals for this meeting. Mr. Kerry, ahead of his trip to Shanghai, said during an interview with the Wall Street Journal that they are talking to China about talking, and they obviously need China at the table for this virtual summit. China has yet to confirm its participation at the summit. And Mr. Kerry also said it was perhaps a more tricky narrative that he said his team is committed to finding ways to force China to be accountable for its pledges, the pledges it's made on reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And he's also cast doubt on whether China's targets on, for the emissions are sufficiently aggressive. Now, that could be a potentially contentious point, as China has already increased its nationally determined contributions to the Paris Agreement. And its goal of reaching net zero carbon dioxide emissions by 2060 or carbon neutrality by 2060 is already 5 to 10 years ahead of the timeline prescribed by the international agreement. So even though China has said openly that it is willing to cooperate with the U.S. on climate matters, whether or not it will accept the U.S. asserting itself as a supervisor is probably going to be another story.
Let's head over to West Africa now, where the World Health Organization says that around a quarter of people in Nigeria are battling various forms of mental illness. Lack of mental health education is one of the major factors contributing to this problem. Mental health practitioners in the country are now on a mission to sensitize the public on the importance of seeking professional help. From Abuja, here's Philly Haza with more.
Esther nearly dropped out of a postgraduate program 3 years ago. She suffered from depression as a result of academic pressure and other personal issues. But Esther says she eventually got help managed to finish her program, and she's now helping to educate other people living with mental health problems.
Instead of spending 24 months, I had to spend extra. And however, regardless of all of that, I have been able to get help and pull through, get my life back on track, and I've been able to get a job, live a normal life, and even volunteer as an educator.
According to the WHO, around 25% of Nigerians suffer from some form of mental illness, and many don't seek help in time. At this mental health awareness hub, run by a non-profit organization, Gede Foundation, people are encouraged to seek help from psychologists and get early therapy. Experts here say wrong perceptions on mental illness, poor awareness about its causes, and widespread stigma are some of the reasons why Nigeria has increasing cases of mental illness.
A lot of people believe that mental health problems are as a result of things that are spiritual in nature, or maybe someone has cursed the other person, And this lack of understanding, it gives us a lot of setback, because a lot of people do not reach out early enough, and then they have heightened worsened conditions.
The federal government wants religious and traditional leaders to help educate citizens better about taking their mental health seriously.
The government has instituted public mental health campaign awareness across the country, but experts say more needs to be done to effectively tackle the mental health problems in Nigeria.
Investing in mental health encompasses so many things. First and foremost, it will be awareness, mental health education, mental health prevention, and mental health promotion by all stakeholders involved.
And with these interventions, many more Nigerians could learn how to take their mental health more seriously, just like Esther, and help produce a more productive society across the country. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
The problem of early marriages continues to be an issue of great concern among many in Zimbabwe. According to a 2019 study, 1 in 3 girls in the country is married off before turning 18. However, one teenage girl is trying to reverse that trend. Natsirai Maritza is using martial arts to keep girls occupied and out of matrimony until they are older. Farai Moikotuya brings us her story.
Biting poverty in Epworth, an informal settlement in Zimbabwe's capital Harare, has forced many young girls into prostitution or early marriage. Natsirai Maritza, who's seen several of her friends married off before they finished school, wants to prevent more of them from falling into the same predicament by training them in Taekwondo.
Some of these girls, they are experiencing difficult situations. They are living in a poverty-stricken area. So in order for them not to get married, they should endure the hardship. Taekwondo is very painful. And for one to continue, she has to endure the pain. So it teaches them endurance and also to believe even in their dreams.
Zimbabwe has a 33.7% prevalence of child marriages, despite the unions being outlawed under a constitution passed in 2013. Delays in aligning new and old provisions have created loopholes.
You know that now there is a bill that is at an advanced stage to try and see what could be done to make sure that there is harmony between the marriage laws. But we don't think that is enough to just have a law. A multi-pronged approach is important. Continue to empower young people with life skills education, with comprehensive sexuality education, and also engage the policy makers and also continue to advocate for implementation of the laws that are there.
Some of those life skills are being imparted in Natsirai's backyard, although getting everyone to join in hasn't been easy.
There was this myth that said if you do Taekwondo, if you're a girl, you will not have children. And they also believe that Taekwondo is only meant for boys. But I'm trying also to fight against that myth, that Taekwondo is meant for everyone. We are all equal, we are all the same. We can do what boys can do even though we're girls.
The 17-year-old wants to prove this by representing her country at the Olympics one day. While Nazirai's Olympic dream may still be some years away, she can already take pride in the fight she's engaged in here, which is aiming to deliver a knockout blow to child marriages. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Well, here is a quick reminder of our top stories. The global distribution of COVID-19 vaccines is still showing major disparities. That's the observation of the head of the World Health Organization. The Africa CDC Director, John Keresong, now says he cannot predict when the second doses will arrive on the continent to cater for those who have had their first round of inoculation. Malawi will have to dispose of about 16,000 coronavirus vaccines. The officials there say the AstraZeneca doses are about to expire due to reluctance among citizens to take the dose. The doses were among the 102,000 donated by the African Union last month. And the United States has issued a range of sanctions against Russia and expelled diplomatic personnel from Russia's mission in Washington, D.C. The White House says the sanctions are meant to target the Russian economy for interfering in last year's election and for launching cyber attacks. The Kremlin says it will soon respond and has summoned Washington's ambassador in Moscow. Well, those were the stories that are making headlines. Just a recap that we gave you there. Let's now hand over to Rama for the latest in business.
Thank you very much, Hannah. Here's what's coming up in business news. Headline inflation in Nigeria goes over 18% as food prices continue to rise. And Coinbase rises by 7% in pre-market trading after its landmark debut on the Nasdaq.
Accra is my kind of city. That's because when I'm here, I feel like I'm back home in Lagos or Aviation, which are two of the major cities I grew up in.
Business in Africa is high risk.
After about a decade covering business news on the continent, I've learned it's all about the high risk, but also the high returns and the high energy. You simply have to adjust in order to keep pace. When I started out as a journalist, my dream was to open people's minds to the different perspectives. From the CEO in the boardroom to the trader out in the street, we all have different stories. From Accra to Addis Ababa, from Cairo to Cape Town, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Here at CGTN, we realize that Africa is on the move, and it's moving fast, but we're moving right along with it. I'm Ucheo Koronkwo, and I'm a business anchor and reporter at CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. Let's start in Nigeria. Headline inflation over there rose to 18.17 in March. The figure was about 0.82 percentage points higher compared to the 17.33% figure recorded back in February. Now, the last time Africa's largest economy recorded an inflation rate higher than 18% was back in January 2017. The headline inflation rate at that point in time was 18.72%. According to the National Statistics Bureau, increases were recorded in virtually all individual consumption units that essentially feed into the headline index. On a month-on-month basis, the headline index went up by 1.56% in March. Similarly, food inflation rose year-on-year by at least 5 percentage points, all the way to 23%. South Africa, in the meantime, has extended by another 3 months the deadline of a loan scheme that is central to efforts to counter the economic impact of the pandemic. President Cyril Ramaphosa announced the bank loan scheme for businesses worth up to 200 billion rand in total and partly guaranteed by the state back in April 2020. Now, the availability of loans in that scheme has now been extended all the way to the middle of July, the 11th of July to be specific, from an earlier deadline of April 11th. The extension is to enable an orderly winding down of the scheme and to assess the applications already received. The scheme's main aim was to encourage banks to lend more and on more favorable terms to enterprises affected by the coronavirus pandemic, which last year pushed the country's economy into its largest annual contraction in a century. Away from the continent now, cryptocurrency firm Coinbase, which runs the top exchange for Bitcoin and other digital currency assets, continued its somewhat volatile start as a public company. Its shares rose by more than 7% in pre-market trading. The stock started trading at about $381 a share in its direct listing on Wednesday. It rose in the opening minutes, but shares reversed later on in the day. Coinbase closed near $328 a share. Coinbase held at least 11.3% of the world's crypto assets at the end of March. The San Francisco-based firm made estimated revenues of $1.8 billion in the first quarter of 2021. That's a nine-fold increase compared to the same period a year earlier. The number of Coinbase's monthly transacting users also went up to 6.1 million from 2.8 million. Now, as the spring meetings of the IMF and the World Bank continue this week, the fund was flooded, still is really, with complaints from Kenyans on social media, pleading with the fund to cease lending money to a government that they see as being profligate. In June 2019, Kenya had at least $53.3 billion in public debt. By the end of January, however, that had gone up by more than a quarter, of about $14 billion. By the end of January, that excluded the $2.34 billion borrowed from the IMF in the middle of March. Now, $307.5 million, or about 13% of that total amount, was disbursed earlier in April. Debt-weary Kenyans had actually put up a petition demanding the suspension of debt issuance, while referring to, among other things, comments from the president that at least $18 million is stolen from public coffers a day. This was the response from the head of the Africa department of the fund when we spoke.
What has happened, of course, is that this pandemic has come and hit our economies really significantly, has reduced revenue mobilization, increased spending needs. So, the concerns that people are expressing about increasing levels of debt in Kenya, of course, fall within this gamut. And, it's not a new one. It's been there for a while. What the government has laid out is a strategy that over the medium term to make sure that debt level stabilizes, while in the near term it creates space to address a lot of the spending needs that have emerged. If they do the alternative, which is to basically bring the deficit down to zero overnight, of course, that would be extremely painful for the economy also. And I think what they've done in seeking the most concessional form of financing available from entities like the IMF is one of the approaches to, over medium term, stabilize debt and begin to bring it down.
Now, the tourism and aviation industries around the world are in trouble, but that's not stopping Tanzania from adding to its fleet for its national carrier. The country has bought 3 new planes, according to the Prime Minister Kassim Majaliwa. Now, the Prime Minister says these aircraft will bring the total number of the planes in Air Tanzania's fleet to 12. CGTN's Daniel Kijo has that story.
Air Tanzania is looking to take off as a serious player in East Africa's aviation game. The company suffered a turbulent time over the last few decades, involving allegations of mismanagement and the loss of millions of dollars. The government under former President John Magufuli initiated a new drive to revive Air Tanzania Company Limited by acquiring brand new aircrafts.
The government has completed the purchase of 3 new planes, 2 being Airbuses, 2 20-300s and 1 -8-400. These planes will arrive during this year, 2021 to 2022. The government will now own the 12 aircrafts as previously planned.
The turbulence looks set to continue, according to a Chief Auditor General report, which revealed losses of $25 million during the 2019-2020 financial year. Analysts say the airline business is a complex one and that across the globe, all major airlines are making losses. An aviation expert for 30 years, Mustafa Katau says aviation is a long-term game and that Air Tanzania has an opportunity to make profits.
I can tell you there's huge scope for flights within Africa. We have 2 airlines which are dominating this market. Ethiopian Airlines and Kenya Airways are dominating the African market. Previously we had South African Airways, which has suspended its operations, but I'm very much confident that Air Tanzania will do a turnaround in the next 3 to 5 years.
The government believes reviving Air Tanzania could be critical in promoting other economic sectors, including tourism, agriculture, fisheries, and trade. In the early 1980s, Air Tanzania used to fly internationally to Dubai, Mumbai, Port Louis, London, and Moroni. The airline faced challenges in the mid-90s to the 2000s, but now the government is looking to use this upgraded fleet to position itself as a strong regional player in the next couple of years. This comes as some foreign airlines to the Kilimanjaro International Airport have resumed flights after recent suspensions following reduced traffic because of the global COVID-19 pandemic. Kenya Airways, Turkish Airlines, and Germany-based Condor are also in talks to resume flights to the Kilimanjaro International Airport, Tanzania's gateway to the northern tourism circuit. Experts believe stabilizing the air transport industry will be key to the survival of the tourism sector.
Tourism goes hand in hand with flights. You cannot separate this, because people have to be brought from wherever they are. And the quickest, reliable way of bringing them to Tanzania counts a lot.
Though President John Magufuli has passed away, his support for the aviation industry will likely continue under President Samia Suluhu Hassan to the relief of the aviation industry. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
The president of the ECB, Christine Lagarde, says that the Eurozone economy is still standing on the dual crutches of monetary and fiscal stimulus. Her comments suggest a pushback on suggestions expressed by some Eurozone central bank leaders that the ECB can now start dialing back its emergency bond purchases.
We consider that both fiscal and monetary support are needed and will be needed until the pandemic crisis is over. When I think of the economy, I think of a patient. I know this is not very good medical analogy at the moment, but think of a patient which is out of the deep crisis, but still on two clutches. You don't want to remove either clutches, the fiscal or the monetary, until the patient can actually walk fine.
And I'll leave it there for the time being. I'll be back at the top of the hour, though. In global business, we'll be exploring vaccine passports. As vaccination rates in high-income countries continue to rise, governments are now proposing or even implementing digital passes to revive the aviation and hospitality sectors. But there is fear that this adoption could leave developing countries behind. How do we solve that? We'll have some answers for you at 1800 GMT. See you then. For now, back to Hannah.
We're looking forward to that, Rama. Thank you so much. Let's now take a short break and return. Hundreds of endangered Cape cormorants taken back to Cape Town's Robben Island.
You're watching breaking news on CGTN.
Welcome to the world today on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Well, let's now turn our attention to wildlife in South Africa, where close to 2,000 endangered Cape cormorants are being returned to Cape Town's Robben Island. They've all been successfully rehabilitated at a local seabird hospital after they were earlier found abandoned on the island. CGTN's Travis Andrews tells us more.
After 3 months of rehabilitative care, these Cape Cormorants are amongst the first to finally set foot back on Robben Island. The seabirds were being cared for at Seabird Rehabilitation Centre, Sankob, who received them when they were just dehydrated chicks. Researchers discovered them abandoned together on the island after the adults failed to return from their search for prey at sea. Now the first lot of healthy Cape Cormorants are being returned to the island by Sankob researchers.
We release the birds. Before we release, we obviously check that they're all healthy, that they have the right weight, that they're waterproof, and then when we take them over to Robben, they're on this enclosure for 2 days, and then they're being released, and then they're being observed by our staff on the island.
So far, around 640 have been taken back to their colony, while the others are still being cared for at Sankob Seabird Hospital. Seabird rangers stationed on the island, though, have been monitoring the well-being of the rehabilitated flock.
Looking at if the birds are integrating with the wild ones, of which that is important. We're looking at monitoring if they those that are kind of like weak, and then sending them back to Sankob for rehabilitation again.
Cape Cormorants are also considered as endangered, so maintaining a healthy population on Robben Island has become a key conservational issue for seabird researchers. One issue that remains critical to the sustainability of the seabird colony on this island is the amount of food around the island, and scientists will have to monitor those fish stocks carefully over the next few months.
The next fish survey that is run by government will be in May or June, so then we know how much fish is around at the moment. But seeing that we are seeing large flocks of cormorants at the moment in all our bays shows that there seems to be fish around.
For now, though, the seabirds seem to be settling in well, and all indications are that the entire rescued flock will make a successful return and reintegration on Robben Island, which is important to boosting their very low numbers. Travis Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
Time for us to take a short break and return the latest